what's your notion of what's the difference between conversation and therapeutic conversation? Clearly, we used to define these things as two separate worlds, but in what you've written about, and apparently the kind of work that you're doing, that distinction is by no means very clear.
Well, what happened was I began to realize that conversation was sort of the social glue that occurs between people. And what's different about therapeutic conversation is that, it was very hard for me to admit that this is what I was doing. In fact, when we wrote that article about conversation, I think it was one of the first articles, the issue may have been devoted to conversation.
Mm-hmm.
In therapy, it was one of the first times we've been interested in this in years.
Mm-hmm.
And what I had found is that the conversation, what's different is that a therapist basically goes for the spark of life. So if a kid has a spark of life around film, or around sports, or they start describing, as this one kid described to me, who was mute. He had thwarted every single therapist that he'd ever met. This kid was essentially regarded as borderline disabled because he never talked to one therapist after the other until one day I, after being the seventh therapist that this kid had, saw him drive up in a car. It was a mint car. And I said to him when he came in, something I never would have said to him before, what was that car that you were driving? Mm-hmm. And we started to talk about this part of his life that was the spark of his life. And that was cars. And through this world of the spark, in his the passion of what mattered to him, he had a whole world of relationships, of people, of dreams, of desires. Nobody had ever spoken to him about that. Mm-hmm. From there, we began therapy.